Red Clockwork Angel. This will not really spoil anything in Clockwork Angel for you. Although hopefully it will intrigue you and make you want to go and read it. Alright. So the prologue of Clockwork Prince is called The Outcast Dead. And it's set in London in 1878. The fog was thick, muffling sound and sight. Where it parted, William Herondale could see the street rising ahead of him, slick and wet and black with rain, and hear the voices of the dead. Not all shadow hunters could hear ghosts, unless the ghosts chose to be heard, but Will was one of the few who could. As he approached the old cemetery, their voices rose in a ragged musical chorus, wails and pleading, cries and snarls. This was not a peaceful burial ground, but Will knew that. It was not his first visit to the Crossbones graveyard near London Bridge. He did his best to block out the noises, hunching his shoulders so that his collar covered his ears, his head down, a fine mist of rain dampening his black hair. The entrance to the cemetery was halfway down the block. A pair of wrought iron gates set into a high stone wall. Any mundane passing by could see the thick chain that bound the gates shut, and the sign declaring the premises closed. It had been 15 years since a body was buried here. As Will neared the gate, something no mundane would have seen materialized out of the fog. A bronze knocker in the shape of a hand, the fingers bony and skeletal. With a grimace, Will reached out one of his own hands and lifted the knocker, letting it fall once, twice, 3 times. Beyond the gates, mist rose like steam from the ground, obscuring the grave markers and the long uneven plots of earth between them. Slowly the mist began to rise and coalesce, taking on an eerie blue glow. Will put his hands to the bars of the gate. The cold of the metal seeped through his gloves into his bones, and he shivered. It was a more than ordinary cold. When ghosts rose, they drew energy from their surroundings, depriving the air and space around them of heat. The hair on the back of Will's neck prickled and stood up as the blue mist swirled, and formed into the shape of an old woman, in a ragged dress and white apron, her head bent down. "Hello, Molly," said Will. "You're looking particularly fine this evening, if I do say so." The ghost raised her head. Old Molly was a strong spirit. Even as moonlight speared through a gap in the clouds, she hardly looked transparent. Her body was solid, her hair twisted into a thick, yellow-gray coil over one shoulder, her rough red hands braced on her hips. Only her eyes were hollow, twin blue flames flickering in their depths. "William Herondale," she said. "Back again. So soon." She moved toward the gate with that gliding motion peculiar to ghosts. Her feet were bare and filthy, despite the fact that they never touched the ground. Will leaned against the gate. "You know I missed your pretty face." She grinned, her eyes flickering, and he caught a glimpse of the skull beneath the half-transparent skin. Overhead, the clouds closed in on each other again, black and rolling, blocking out the moon. Idly, Will wondered what old Molly had done to get herself buried here, far from consecrated ground. Most of the whispering voices of the dead belonged to suicides and stillbirths, those outcast dead who could not be buried in a churchyard. She chortled. "What do you want, young shadow hunter? Malthus venom? The talons of a Morax demon? I have some, polished very fine. The poison at the tip, entirely invisible." "No," Will said, "that's not what I need. I need 4-eye demon powders ground fine." Old Molly seemed to flicker as Will spoke, like the flame of a candle at an open window. She shook her head. Will exhaled, his breath turning to mist on the cold air. "Surely," he said, "that's hardly the worst thing anyone's ever paid you for." Magnus had already sent Will to old Molly several times now. Once for black candles that stuck to his skin like tar, once for the bones of an unborn child, and once for a bag of fairy eyes that dripped blood on his shirt. Demon powder sounded pleasant by comparison, but Molly shook her head slowly. "You think I'm a fool," she said. "This is a trap. You Nephilim catch me selling that sort of stuff, and it's the stick from old Mom." "You're already dead." Will did his best not to sound annoyed. "I don't know what you think the clave could do to you." Her hollow eyes flamed. The prisons of the silent brothers beneath the earth can hold the living or the dead. You know that. Will held his hands up. No tricks. Surely you must have heard the rumors running around Downworld. The Clave has other things on its mind than tracking down ghosts who traffic in demon powders and fairy blood. He leaned forward. I'll give you a good price. He drew a cambric bag from his pocket and dangled it in the air. It clinked like coins rattling together. They all fit your description. An eager look came over her dead face, and she solidified enough to take the bag from him. She plunged one hand into it and brought her palm out full of rings. Gold wedding rings, each tied in a lover's knot at the top. Old Molly, like many ghosts, was always looking for that talisman, that piece of her past that would finally allow her to die. The anchor that kept her trapped in this world. In her case, it was her wedding ring. It was common belief, Magnus had told Will, that the ring was long gone, buried under the silty bed of the Thames. But in the meantime, she'd take any bag of found rings on the hope that one would turn out to be hers. So far, it hadn't happened. She dropped the rings back into the bag, which vanished somewhere on her undead person, and handed him a folded sachet of powder in return. He slipped it into his jacket pocket just as the ghost began to shimmer and fade. Hold up there, Molly. That's not all I've come for tonight. Her spirit flickered, while greed warred with impatience. Finally, she grunted. Very well. What else do you want? Will hesitated. This was not something Magnus had sent him for. This was something he wanted to know for himself. Love potion? Old Moll screeched with laughter. Love potion? For you? It's not my way to turn down payment, but anyone who looks like you has got no need of love potions, and that's a fact. No, Will said, a little desperation in his voice. I was looking for the opposite, something that might put an end to being in love. A hatred potion? Molly sounded amused. I was hoping for something like indifference or toleration. She made a snorting noise, astonishingly human for a ghost. I hardly like to tell you this, Nephilim, but if you want a girl to hate you, there are easy ways of making it happen. You don't need my help with the poor thing. With that, she vanished, spinning away into the mists among the graves. Will looking after her sighed. Not for her, he said under his breath, although there was no one to hear him. For me. And he leaned his head against the cold iron gate.